Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm Carlene Johnson, state government reporter for the Center Square. And with me is TJ Martinell, our investigative reporter holding Sound Transit accountable in the latest series of articles he's produced. TJ, in your article this week, you reported on the billions in funding for Sound Transit projects that have come from federal grants. So thank you, rest of America, for paying for our projects. And in the past 7 years, it's been close to $4 billion and another $9 billion in future grants for future, ST3 projects. So,
all right.
Question is anybody riding these trains? And with the rising costs for everything, is that creating some issues for Sound Transit and how much they might have to go back to request from the federal government?
Yeah, they're looking at updating their financial plan because of rising costs associated with property values and construction costs. And also, who knows what inflation's done to the estimated cost of projects. I do know that ST3, I think that they accounted for that as part of their planning initially about 10 years ago. But I don't think anybody could have anticipated the inflation that happened following the COVID lockdowns. So that's one of the things that they're going to have to look at. And so I reached out to them with a bunch of questions regarding federal funding. And they said, we got to update our financial plan. And when we do that, we'll have answers to some of the questions that you have. So it's going to be, they don't rely on federal funding for, obviously, the vast majority of it. It comes from taxes that are imposed locally. But federal funding is still an important component of it. And they're still going to need it to get these they don't necessarily need this money to get the projects done, but they're going to take even longer, to the point where, the people who approve the taxes are going to be long dead by the time the projects get off the ground. I don't think people fully realize that Sound Transit's ST3 is one of the most ambitious transportation projects in the country. It is when it was proposed in 2016, it is effectively a 30-year, almost 30-year project that was initially going to cost $55 billion. So now it's going to cost much more than that, but it's also expected to be done in, I think, 2046. So by the time that's when the last project is expected to be completed.
And
so
what's the last project at this point? Is that linking Federal Way? I mean, Federal Way is going to finish next year, right? That's where I live. So I'm excited for that to finish, if it ever does. And then will Federal Way then connect to Lakewood, or what's the end point?
That depends on, and it might depend on what the financial plans, the update's going to say.
But they promised it was all going to be connected, right? That was, I thought, the plan, but maybe not.
Right. And so, for example, the city of Everett was originally going to have light rail as a top priority in ST2. That was the original plan under that Sound Transit promised in 1996. Now the city of Everett will get light rail in the 2040s, and that's if they overcome a budget deficit that they have right now.
So they're still 15 to 20 years away from getting it to Everett.
Yeah, I mean, this
Wow.
is, I think, to give people an idea. If a person who approved Sound Move, the original Sound Move tax package in 1996, they're going to be, if they were in their 20s, they're going to be in their 50s and 60s by the time this stuff's done. This represents a person's entire career, and a lot of people who voted for it initially are going to be deceased by that time. So this is something where it's a very long-term project, and this is one of the interesting things about it is there's going to be so many people moving in and out of the agency while it's being worked on. I mean, theoretically, some of these construction companies, you could spend your entire career just working on light rail for Sound Transit.
I would think, though, TJ, that if they're going to go back to the federal government and say, we need X number of dollars to complete these projects, that, especially under the current administration, they would say, okay, wait a minute, show us what you've done with what we gave you before. Have you met your budgets? Have you met your timelines? Have you, and with Sound Transit, it certainly seems, based on your reporting, those timelines haven't been met. The projects have not been completed at the cost promised and the timeline promised. So going back to the federal government to say, we need more to finish this up, might not be met with, okay, sure. I mean, I'm not sure about that.
That's the risk, is that they go to the federal government for grant funding, and the federal government could do a couple things. One of the things they could just say is, we don't have the money. Like, this is where you have the Doge and
right.
This focus on government efficiency, and they're just saying, why are we spending money on this light rail project when we are running annual budget deficits with Congress? The second thing that they could do is say, hey, your ridership has not recovered from 2019, and that's ridership in your urban areas. You want us to give you money to move light rail into low density neighborhoods and communities. That doesn't make any sense to them. Or to the feds could say, we're not going to spend money on light rail in low density areas. The only areas where light rail makes sense, they could argue, is in high density areas. And the only city in America to match the density levels of European cities that have this kind of light rail or
where it works,
is New York City. It's the only that even comes close to that kind of density. The Pacific Northwest, and due to the geographics of Western Washington and the Central Puget Sound area, there's lakes, there's hills, there's all sorts of geographical constraints that prevents high density housing that you want for that. Now, they've tried to do stuff where they have transit oriented developments and communities, but there's no guarantee that the person living there is living there so that they have access to transit.
Well, so that's it. And they're doing that. Like, here in Federal Way, they are doing that. And there's massive development. It's these, apartment complexes and retail on the, ground floor, to try and encourage people like, okay, live here and then take the train to go to work, whether that's Tacoma or Seattle. But I think that's part of the problem too, is like, you don't know that person is necessarily going to make use just because they want to live there. Sure, they want to live there. Maybe it's a nice apartment, it's brand new, that they're going to get on the train and ride. And right, like you mentioned, right in your article, TJ, ridership, I don't know. I mean, the sounder works, right? I mean, that line of sounder that's been going for years and years. I see a ton of people on those trains. I also see the trains that travel for light rail from Angle Lake and up north, and the trains aren't full. Sometimes there's nobody on the flipping train at all.
Yeah, I think that the issue is going to be moving forward what the vision of ST3 is going to be. Do they want to fully finish the light rail line, or are they going to want to shift towards bus rapid transit, which is costs less, takes less time, and also if they want to change their route, they don't have to rebuild infrastructure. Whereas light rail, once it's there, it's pretty much going to be there forever. Barring an earthquake, the big one happens, the light rail system's going to be there. And so it can't change a response to rider demand, saying, hey, I don't want to go here, I want to go there. Like you can with a bus line, where you say, hey, we don't have enough riders to justify this route anymore. We're going to shift over to a route where there's increased demand and have greater frequency of buses going through it. So that's where, we're going to have to wait and see what the financial plan update says, but that's going to be, they may have to take into consideration the fact that the federal government may not be as friendly to these kind of projects as they've been in the past.
Not this federal government makeup. No possibility. And I wonder if the plan now is just kind of wait it out and hope for, a different administration, in 2028 that they can go, okay, well, let's ask these guys for more money because they're going to be friendlier to us. Well, are you going to give us a tease for what the next, because you've been doing a series of investigative reports on Sound Transit. Give us a tease, or is it too soon?
I'm just going to be looking at what's been promised and what's been delivered, if it's been delivered. So, and especially with ST3, because there was what was promised back in 2016, and also what they said to the legislature in 2015 when they got approval. And on a side note from that, here's the question that could come from the financial plan update. Are they going to go to voters again and ask for an ST4?
goodness.
Are they going to ask for another tax package as a way to pay for it if they can't get the federal dollars? So that's going to be, I haven't heard anything to indicate that, but, this is maybe they're going to wait for a more positive election year where the voters are in a mood for approving stuff because, as we know throughout the state, people have been rejecting local property levies for the school district. So, and the state just passed the largest tax increase in state history. So that puts them in a bit of a predicament because I think voters might be
not
they feel like they pay enough taxes and they're not interested in that anymore. So I think that the situation has changed significantly since 2016. So we'll have to keep an eye on it.
Well, I appreciate your reports on Sound Transit and kind of holding them accountable and, letting our readers and viewers, you really know where their tax dollars have gone or maybe been wasted. I know you've got some more pieces coming up. I look forward to that. So to see TJ's article at thecentersquare.com. And for now, I'm Carlene Johnson with Washington in Focus.